Hello, we'd love to hear you. There might be another extra window that you need to click on so that you join the call. Zoom does that sometimes, but otherwise, I mean, let's hope that you can hear us. You can type to us as well, but we should be able to hear you and speak to you and maybe even see you, but that's up to you if you put your camera on, but we're ready and would love to see you. Let's see.
Probably, yeah. Zoom glitch.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, a lot of components to cover. And okay, great. So he is here trying to adjust his audio. So in that case, I take it you can hear us. Can you just confirm that in the chat, maybe, just so that we know? Type it to him as well, just to be sure.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. In theory.
I mean, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, you should be. Awesome.
That's good. We weren't talking much yet. So great. I'm glad people can hear us.
Awesome.
So it's just our team, or Oluwafemi from our team, the Fly Colony, that we are not hearing yet, but hopefully soon. I would say we're going to start by maybe welcoming Ayna and asking you to introduce yourself a little bit so that we all know who you are, and then we can go from there. And hopefully Oluwafemi will be with us in sound as well when you're done with your introduction.
Awesome, sounds great. So hello everyone, my name is Ayna. I'm based out of the United States and I live in New York. So I started my career working in the food industry as a pastry chef. Absolutely loved that and decided to go get a degree in food science, be able to scale products up. From there, I started my company about 2 years ago. And it was within the CPG space as well. Did some really, really great stuff. Did a lot of work on pitching, bringing products to market. And, you know, now I'm working with startups primarily in bringing their products to market. So I work as a consultant right now. And I'm also one of the regional coordinators for Thought for Food, which means I get to meet some really, really awesome people in New York, bring them together and create amazing conversations.
Yes, and that's what we love. Yeah, exactly. So for those of you who've only come across TFF in the challenge, there's a whole other part of TFF. So we have the digital labs and the challenge that's happening, and obviously you're part of that. But like we always say, you're also part of the TFF family now. And so that means that you're part of our global network. And basically the way TFF is set up is that we have the core team, of which I'm in, and then we have our regional coordinators like Anya, and we have 17 of those who are all across the world, and they basically organize events there, get people together to get excited about food and ag sustainability. And then we've got, oh, hello. Amy, we can hear you, or we can hear a car behind you.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Ah, that's great. Perfect. Hi. Let me just finish that one bit before we, you know, say hi to you properly. So we have our regional coordinators, and then we have ambassadors as well, who are just amazing people. We have more than 400 ambassadors who are scattered all across the globe again. And basically they organize events, they reach out to people like you. So I think a lot of you have come across TFF through the ambassadors as well. And so they're there, first of all, now to support our teams, but also to just get anyone and everyone speaking about food and ag sustainability and kind of get them to think about it a little bit more. So there is that entire other part of TFF, which is really bringing the family together. And so Ayna helps us a lot by being a regional coordinator for that. So thank you. And now, welcome, Oluwafemi from the Fly Colony. And yeah, welcome. And do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, my name is Oluwafemi Adeneko from Nigeria. I'm the managing director of the Fly Colony. You want me to say more? Or that is all? As a brief introduction.
I'm going to let Ayna run it now, and I'm just going to take a little bit of a backseat. So,
absolutely. Hello, Olafemi and Olawumi. I don't know if I pronounced that correct. I apologize. But yeah, I'd love to just hear, your background. Yes, and kind of how you came up with Fly Colony and what inspired you.
Actually, we came about the idea of Fly Colony because of the basic problem we noticed with farmers. Basic problems we noticed within the farming environment. One of the problems are high cost.
Something happened.
Phone cut him out. That's a shame.
Oh.
And Olawumi, you're muted at the moment, but you can unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear how you fit in and what you do and what your background is and your passion for your project. We're not.
Okay. Hello.
Yes. Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Olufemi is the team lead of Fly Colony. I'm providing technical support in terms of programming.
Mm-hmm.
That's system development generally. That's what I'm doing at the background for Fly Colony.
Awesome.
So,
yeah, and maybe you can speak a little bit more about how you came up with Fly Colony, the idea, and what makes you want to work on it.
Okay. Basically, Fly Colony is trying to strengthen the food that's animal feed production, value chain. Mm-hmm. in the agri ecosystem. Like he was, talking when he started before he went off. The problem in the system itself is about high cost. That's one of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Then apart from that, the waste that comes with producing food with a conventional method, it's another problem in itself. So Fly Colony is trying to solve all these problems put together. One of the things it's trying to do is to use soja, the soja fly to breed maggot feed. Maggot, dry it up and convert it to protein for animal feed. So with Fly Colony concept, we're able to reduce, the cost of producing feed for fish, especially for fish farmers, and related feeds. So basically, that's what. But from my own the angle here I'm working from the technical point of view. Apart from the fact that we want to be able to track the process that's from the supplier of waste produce to the final consumer of our produce itself. Okay, I think Femi is back online. So let me just round up this way. We have created a system to track. So what the technical part is doing is creating a form of traceability. We want to know what the nature of the waste you are providing for us. Not just that, we also want to be sure that the source is genuine, and we want to also feed the people at the consuming end. We want to give them an opportunity to track back to the source of what we are doing. So that's what the system is doing generally. I think Femi can take off from me with that.
Okay, okay. Well, what I was saying, I think she asked me a question, why did what brought the idea? And basically what brought the idea was the problems we noticed within the agricultural space. The first problem we noticed was high cost of animal feed. We found out that there was a problem of tracking and traceability of within the food system. There's so much fake around. People don't know which is which. And lastly, we noticed there's a problem of overfishing, and it has translated. Overfishing. There's a problem of overfishing, and it's also causing the price of animal feed to increase. So these are the things that actually motivated us to start the project.
Awesome. That all sounds great. I had a look at your pitch deck. I really like, what you're working on. Can you tell me a little bit more about your own background and your team's background as well?
Oh, my background and what? I should tell you more about my background and. Hello?
Yeah.
I didn't hear the question very well. So I should tell you more about the background.
Like your own background, what you were working on before, and how you informed your team as well.
Okay. As per my background, by profession, I'm an economics. I graduated as an economics. I have some farming background, but the idea of insect farming came out of let's say my search or desire to find a better way a sustainable way of feeding.
Okay.
So I was okay. I'm true.
Yeah.
You want to say something? Can you hear me very well?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So actually, my background, I'm an economist by profession, by training, by profession. But I've been in the agricultural space for over 10 years. I've been into farming. I started with a cassava farm. Cassava farm. I also have I have a fly farm now. So I've been into the agricultural space, and I have noticed the problem farmers face, and that was what prompted me. That was what motivated us to start the fly colony. So I started with my team.
Okay.
I have Olawumi, Budele, and I have Adenyekon, Bamidio, too, as my team too.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I was looking at the pitch deck, and I think you've really thought about your problem. I think there's obviously a few touch-ups that I'm going to be suggesting over the session, and I hope you're going to find them helpful. But just as a heads up, can you see the video, because I am going to share my screen so that we know kind of what slide we're talking about. Yeah, just let me know if you can see the screen.
Yeah, I can see the screen.
Okay, perfect.
I can see the screen.
And then do you have something to take notes on as well?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I need to start sharing the screen.
At the bottom of your screen, click on share on the green button, right?
Is it the share button?
Yeah.
Okay. It just keeps giving me, 1 second. Okay, here. Okay, so can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So we're gonna go right at the beginning. Yeah, so I kind of wanted to start with a few more general comments, and then we can kind of take it slide by slide. If you have any questions, and then I can just give you my thoughts. How does that sound to you guys? Great, okay, awesome.
Sound great, yes.
Okay, so I think one of the first things that I noticed, you can work on some like beautification aspects of the whole pitch deck. So kind of one of the first things that I noticed was, there's like a lot of stock pictures. And so I would suggest maybe finding like a website where you can get consistent stock photos, just because one of the first things that, especially when you can't present with your pitch deck, that's going to be really important, is that you can grab whoever's reading your deck with, how attractive it is, and how enticing it is, so that, they can maintain their interest. And so your first page, I suggest, is probably just your logo, maybe have like a little fun tagline. And then I would also suggest having your contact information both on your first and your last slide. Just in case they're like, okay, I've made a note of it, or somebody needs to take a picture of it. Pretty easy and convenient way to do that. The other thing that I also suggest is to save your presentation in a PDF format. So when I was looking at it on Google before, some of the things got a little bit misplaced, which obviously, that's not your fault, but it just happens, when you start emailing your deck to people, and, sometimes it doesn't turn out the way that you want it to. So I would suggest, like, just a small edit to make sure that every time you send it, it's in a PDF format. Yeah, so those were, I guess, the two things that, overall I saw like on a very high level. And so we can just sort of jump into the slides specifically. Are there, before I kind of delve into them, do you have any specific questions or areas that you were concerned about that you were like, oh, I want to ask X, Y, or Z?
Go with no.
Okay, I will take that as a no. Okay, so on your first slide, I would suggest to just have your logo, have a nice little tagline, and you can pretty much get rid of, where you have written the fly where you have written the fly colony. I think, you have a nice logo, which is more than sufficient. And I would also suggest to not give out your solution first. So, I think on the next slide, you kind of go and talk about the problems, which I think is a better way to do it. So kind of build a little bit of suspense before, you kind of talk about your actual solution. So I would say, like, this specific text is probably better suited for slide 3. Yeah. So kind of jumping onto slide 2. So in terms of the problems you've identified, I think they're all good problems to work on. But however, you have to say, okay, like if you're saying these are the 3 problems, you need to also reflect that in your solution. So you have to say, my solution is solving these 3 specific problems by doing X, Y, and Z. So let's say, you say that I am going to go make these maggots that we will be selling, and it's going to cut down the cost for the person who's purchasing by 20% or 30%. And that needs to be very, very clear when you say that in your solution. So instead of, explaining how you are actually cultivating your product, you need to be able to sell more on the consumer side about why your product is the product to be sold. So I would say, in terms of food waste, what kind of food waste would you be collecting, and what your source is, and what problem does it solve on, the person who's ending up with food waste. So I would put that on your solution slide. So as the first problem you identified. In terms of the second one, you talk about how there's environmental degradation. And then I would also cover that here in terms of, by potentially what percentage could you reduce this overfishing by? And then in terms of the third problem that you have, in saying farmers spend about 70% of their money towards feeding, what is the price competitiveness that you bring to your product that they would be spending lesser? And maybe you could even have an understanding about how much lesser they'll be spending, because I did see that you do have some sales history, so that should be something that you could gather, and that would make a stronger case for what your problem is and what your solution is as well. Do you have any questions so far?
So I'm going to come in with a question.
Not at the moment.
Oh, good. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so that is, the problem solution slide. I think your problem and solution, they flow very well. And in terms of having, the growth cycle of the actual product, I would suggest having this as an appendix slide. And you can choose to have or not have appendix slides depending on, where it's going, where it's being presented. So I suggest for presentations to have about 5 to 10 appendix slides, depending on, what kind of questions you might be getting. But if you have a limit for submission, I would suggest perhaps this is not where your majority of focus should be. And as for the digital solution, I would try and figure out a way to also put this issue of having traceability as a part of your problem, because this is clearly a very big part of the solution that you're offering. The other thing that I noticed is that you have this little benefits kind of call out, and on the next slide you have the exact, I would say, same text. So I would suggest either having it right on this slide or on the next slide, but otherwise it becomes a little bit more repetitive, and it can be a little bit more distracting. So yeah, and in terms of this little, I would say, like 3-way diagram you've made, I'm not quite sure what this is, where you have it seems to be some kind of a cost. It's not very clear what it's pertaining to, what the relevance is to your diagram here. Yeah, and then I would, even when you have the unique value propositions, I might try and put like little call outs saying, oh, between, like, for the food waste, there's a very specific proposition for this person. Or, when you have a specific transaction, you could say this is the kind of output you're getting. So it becomes a little bit more visual, and can explain a little bit more about where in the chain you're creating value.
Sorry, can I just say something around here?
Yes, absolutely.
Beautiful. I think the point we're making for this is we run a token from the technical point. What it means is if you are to access the service provided by the platform, you need to buy the token. So I think that's what is trying to what we are trying to address from this 1xAG to 0.035 USD per token.
Got it. Okay. So I would make that a little bit more clear, and maybe you could put that a little bit on top, just making it clear, like, 1 token is equal to this value, just because here it's not too clear that this is what the token value is. And I don't know enough about blockchain, but you may get more questions about, how you valued your token, exactly why, you're reducing your costs by offering tokens. But that's just as a heads up, to be prepared for those questions and to be able to answer them.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, and in terms of unique value propositions, I think this specific text that you have, about saying insect meal is a source of a protein-rich feed, I think you should actually put that in your solution slide, the first one that you have here. I think this is a really good statement. It explains what your product is being used for.
Okay.
I'm gonna continue. Yeah, so I would put that back into the slide. And then I would say, because you do have a competition slide, you could probably combine your unique value propositions and competition both into a singular slide as well. In terms of revenue models, I would say having a margin that shows, even if it's a 50% margin, a 50% margin can be a very good numerical to have in your slide. And then you should be prepared about is, what kinds of margins exist within your current competition as well. And, you know, this is probably going to be a very good basis for you to be able to create a sort of a revenue model as well. Kind of going back to your competition and USP, I would suggest to, and you can Google this a little bit more, kind of like a competition matrix. So you could say have two axes saying, you know, a competitive advantage in terms of a sustainable method of production, but also, you know, having another axis of circular economy or price. And you can show how your product is more superior than the 2 to 5 competitors that you've identified. And, you know, that becomes a really clear visual for why you are doing better or will be doing better in the future than some of the other companies that are still in the market. But, you know, clearly you've identified somebody that is in the space. And, you know, I think you should be able to, and you have good data to show why you would be doing better. On to the next slide. So in terms of market traction, you know, I think this is all really, really good data. One of the things that I would suggest calculating, which would make for a really strong numerical, is having an average order quantity. So in terms of 5 customers, you know, how much are they ordering? What is their ordering frequency? And what do you expect their lifetime value to be? So let's say today, you know, if you have a business development or a salesperson, and, you know, for them to get a sale, it costs you hypothetically $10, but the kind of business that your customer is giving you is, you know, over a lifetime, $100. You know, that's a great numerical to show, and that brings very strong validity to your business model. And, you know, you can kind of show that in terms of how much profit you're getting and some of those numbers. So I would say being able to show how much you've made and how much, you know, what your current stats show that you could be making would be great. The other thing that I do like that you did mention that, you know, when your blockchain platform is coming, and one of the things you could do is have a separate slide showing your timeline. So where you've been, you know, having some like big milestones. So say, you know, when your company was formed, talking a little bit about when you launched into the market, when you got one of your first customers potentially, and, you know, kind of showing a timeline for where you will be going in the next 1 to 2 years. And, you know, that's very helpful for somebody to visualize and see how their money will be getting in and, you know, where you're headed. So that brings in a lot more credibility as well. The team slide, I love that, you know, you have a good and diverse team and, you know, you have a good number of people as well. One of the things that I would do is under your titles, I would put maybe 1 or 2 bullet points about, you know, maybe where you got your degree or, you know, how much experience you have in a certain area that makes you credible to be in that position. You know, this is probably one of the most important slides, primarily because your investors will always invest in you as people and not at the end of the day, you know, what your product is and what you're selling. So I would suggest making this as strong as you possibly can, you know, show off your skills. So yeah, and, you know, I think it's great that you have your advisors on there as well. It shows some credibility as well. In terms of social impact, I would also kind of try and tie this back into, you know, how much at your scale can you do? So, you know, I think you've identified 3 really good areas for what kinds of impact that you can be creating. But, you know, let's say with every kilogram of maggots that you sell, you know, you could be saving like half a kilo of fish potentially. Like maybe you have that number, maybe you don't. But if you can kind of tie that back into your local impact, you know, that will make it all the more convincing. Yeah, so, but I think you've definitely identified like 3 good areas. And then I would even suggest, you know, under employment generation, kind of looking at how many jobs you could be potentially creating as you grow. So say, you know, you employ 50 people over the next 5 years, hypothetically. And, you know, that's a good place to start as well. And in terms of use of funds, I think it's great that you have this little pie chart I would suggest of having these little labels that you have here next to the corresponding piece of pie that they show, because otherwise the pie doesn't quite tell me, which area it represents. And, that's the purpose of having a visual. And then I think, depending on where you're pitching and, I guess how far you are in your business, you could also show, if there's a potential return, and, when your investor can expect. And then the other slide I would highly suggest having, and especially, when you're considering pitching it at TFF, is, take a look at TFF's website and kind of identify the areas where you are going to be a great fit for TFF, in terms of saying, if you're innovative, or if you're new to market, or, if you're using multispectral thinking. So, really show that that fit of what your business is to what, investor or your TFF is looking for. And that's just going to get, a little bit more attention from them as well. And I would say,
I'd love to jump in there for a sec.
Absolutely.
So that was a perfect point, and you guys know what we're looking for. It's all in the participant toolkit. There are judging criteria, the things we're after, like the multispectral thinking, like you're scaling up your team. These are all there, the things we're looking for. So use the participant toolkit and the pitch deck guidelines that will tell you some of this, how you can tailor it to your TFF challenge. So absolutely use that.
Yeah. And, that's, you make a great point in terms of tailoring as well, is that, one of the interesting things about pitching is that every time you decide to share your deck or present somewhere, you have to make sure that you really understand your audience and, what they're looking for and what your ask is at the end of the day. So, maybe if it's not in TFF, but elsewhere where you're raising money, have a slide where you're having an ask, and that could be something from mentorship to say, raising a specific amount of funds, or maybe you're looking for consumers. So just keep that in mind and make sure that, if they have some kind of a criteria, which fortunately TFF does, that you can go through your pitch deck and say, have I covered the specific thing that they're looking for? And, give them a reason to not be able to say no to you. Yeah, so that is, I would say, a very quick and easy version of, some of the higher level things that I've noticed that I think would be great to add to your deck. But I think, you've come up with a great idea, you identified a great problem, you have traction, you just need to tie it together and show that, hey, like, I know exactly what I'm doing, and you can trust me with your money. Hello?
Hi.
Yeah, can hear you. Thanks for the feedback. We'll work on that, especially the points you raised. We'll work on that, and the one that actually interested me is the one you said about our team. I mean, putting what they came up, at least their qualifications, why they are there, and the one you said about the funding requirements. For the requirement, the pile is not well specific enough. And lastly, knowing the audience you are submitting your pitch deck to. It really matters. So we'll work on it, and I think the video is being recorded. I will listen to it over again with my team, and we'll try and meet up the submission deadline.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, after yes.
Yeah, and one last thing that I forgot to mention is another great slide to add in is a slide about your consumers. So, I didn't quite see exactly who you're catering to. So you could say that it is a farmer, who raises, pigs or livestock or whatever. But if you can find out exactly, what the number is, where they live, like some more demographic information, you can actually create and get an idea of how much market you can grab. And that can be either in terms of, money, or, how much dollar value you could create. capture, or that could be in terms of users. So you could say, if we plan to get 5% of the market, we're going to get 100 farmers hypothetically. So if you can have that information in there as well, that's going to be able to create more trust with whoever is viewing your deck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Do you have any questions or areas that you're unsure about?
Oh, okay. Font size is not worthy. Or now is not worthy. I mean, picture the word and picture is balanced. Any
Really hard to understand you. Sorry, it's really hard to understand you. I think you
my question is this. Can I repeat it? Hello?
Hello? Yeah.
My question is this. Is after the font size of the picture is okay? Is it not worthy? Is the word and picture is it well balanced? I mean,
I'm sorry, you're still cutting off.
Could you maybe remove your video? It might make it better. I think, and like, let us know if I understood. I think you asked whether the font sizes might be okay and how many pictures you should have.
Yes, that's what I was saying. Got it.
Okay. Yeah. I think overall your font size is pretty okay. Like I would say on this specific slide, you could have something a little bit bigger. But I would say that is more pertinent to when you present rather than sending a pitch deck. Like this is perfectly legible, I would say. Here, I would definitely increase the size. And I would say and I would also suggest kind of, making sure your images are the right size. So, they're different heights right now. And, their aspect ratio is a little bit off as well. So I would say there's, your content is great. There's a lot of, I would say, beautifying that needs to be done. And then in terms of number of images, I always say the more you can make it visual, the better. So I would say, the lesser words, the better. So here, let's say hypothetically, if we look at your 1, 2, and 3 points, if you can reduce the number of words and still be able to deliver that message, it makes it more effective. And kind of going to the competition slide. So here you could potentially not have any text at all and just be able to have the two axes like I suggested. And I'm happy to send you a link that kind of shows a little bit more about the diagram I'm talking about as well. But yeah, I would say the more visuals you can have, the lesser text you can have, the better it is. But when you do decide to replace your text with visuals, you have to make sure that it's a good quality, professional looking visual. And then in terms of just like overall slide deck presentation, I would also suggest having some brand colors maybe. So for my company, we did like a very dark red. And we had, we would do something very simple, like just have, a rectangle at the top of every slide. And, that just shows that, that this is very specific to, what your company is. And then just another little tip that you can do is that you can take this logo, shrink it down probably that size and put it at the bottom right of every single slide. So, even if somebody needs to print it, it says that it's still your pitch deck.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, thank you very much for the feedback.
I think you just said, did you just say thank you for the feedback?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. You're welcome.
Great. I mean, from those of you listening, if you have any questions as well about like general putting pitch decks together, I think we're starting to see, or we see that Ayna is incredibly knowledgeable about this. So if you have any general questions, you know, let us know if there are any specific questions that you're finding that you're struggling with on your pitch deck, or if there's anything you want to ask the fly colony as well about their like solution, their pitch. You know, this is the time, so you can just write them in the chat or in the little Q&A and go. And as always, this call is being recorded, and so you'll find it on the Digital Labs later, because there was a lot of great advice in there. So you're going to be able to review that, and there'll be little notes as well, so that you can see what there is, so that you can obviously learn from this as much as possible and adapt it to your own slides and your own pitch deck. I mean, also, it's worth saying, like, every pitch deck is unique to you, right? So the way you structure it is like works for you, it's got your things in, like, don't try to, like, there is no one solution fits all, because just make it unique and kind of yours, so that people can see what's
So we do have a question in the Q&A. So the question is, I'm aware of the judging criteria, but you said we have to do something about it on the slides. So just looping back into, so when you do look at the judging criteria, make sure, so if it says, one of the criteria is, you're being judged on, let's say, innovation, go through your slide deck and see if you as a judge can pick up and give yourself a high score on the innovation side of that, of judging. So, all of the things that they are looking for, make sure that they're included in your slide deck. And sometimes, if you're pitching to, let's say, an investor or another competition, they might even give you, say, we're looking for these 5 specific things or 5 specific points. Just making sure that you have included everything that is asked for at the bare minimum, because sometimes, some of the obvious things can get a little missing.
There is another question in the chat about how many slides should we have in general in a pitch deck?
I don't know if TFF has a specific requirement, but I like to choose the number of slides based on time. So I would say, about 1 slide per minute is a decent amount to have. I would say for a 10-minute presentation, you could have about 12 slides and it's okay. I wouldn't suggest anything more than 10. Sometimes you can even do lesser, about 7 or 8. But I would say if you're presenting, make sure that you absolutely do have an appendix. And the best way to create your appendix is to go through a slide or sit down with somebody who has not seen your presentation and see what are some of the first questions that come up. So every time a question comes up, you will absolutely be prepared. But I would say in terms of just submission, you can get away with just having your normal pitch deck and not necessarily having an appendix depending on where it's going.
Yep, and just for the TFF and for the TFF challenge, we say maximum of 20 slides. So there's plenty of space to tell us about you, but don't go over, but 20 maximum.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind is that when you are sending your pitch deck, make sure you can send it out to some people that you know and that they can concretely understand what you're saying without you actually having to present it. Because sometimes there might be some missing gaps of saying, oh, you said this, but I'm not sure why the slide is here. Or, some slides are just images and they have no accompanying text, and they might not be too suited for just a pitch deck submission without any presentation with it. So just bear that in mind.
Perfect. There's a question as well in the chat about whether to follow the pitch deck checklist. So the pitch deck checklist, which I'm about to post the link to in the chat as well, that is there for you to use as guidance, yes. It's a little bit of, again, as was said in the call, you should try to tailor it to what you're applying to. So you're applying to TFF. So yes, use the checklist. It's there to help you to apply your pitch to what we're looking for. But that said, you don't, it's not like set in stone. We're not telling you to exactly, you have to have it that way. You will know what flows best for your solution. So use it as guidance. I would say make sure you cover what it says in there, like all the points, because those are the things that we'll be looking for, but don't use it as like a guide that you absolutely have to follow step by step by step. Yeah, so that answers that question. Perfect. No, it's not mandatory, exactly. Perfect, and here is the link. All right, are there any other questions about the pitch, TFF, Ayna's story? One more, let's see. We'll wait while he types the question and go from there. And I mean, you know, the thing to bear in mind a little bit as well is that when you're part of a competition like here, the people who are going to judge your pitch, they're going to see many, many, many pitch decks. So yours has got to be different and yours has got to stand out. And we have to afterwards, you know, if we forget it by the time we've gone through it, that's not a good sign. So use what Ayna's just said, kind of like make it, you know, branded, make sure you have your little logo on every slide. It's an easy way to just reinforce your name in like the judges as well, so that they can, at the end, they're like, oh, I remember this one because yeah, I remember seeing that logo everywhere. Even if it's subconscious, if it's, you know, a little corner, it's going to help you and it's going to help the judges remember you. So think of that. And there's the question. We should consider the deck here as a stage pitch or separate material. I'm not sure I fully understand your question, unfortunately.
I think it might be when you have the deck submission, I'm understanding it's just the deck and like you don't get to present anything with it on the first stage.
Right, yes, that is right, yeah. So the pitch you send us is the pitch deck itself that you're not going to present, because so that's going to be for us to, and for our experts to choose our winning teams. So yeah, you're not going to present that. If, you know, the finalists that get presented, they will then put a pitch together that you'll be presenting on stage at the TFF Summit in Malaysia, and at the Academy, we'll go over it, we'll make it like the most beautiful thing in the world. But right now, for your submission, it's a non-presented pitch deck, so you can tailor it to that as well. And no, so yeah, so the other question now is whether the video is like a voiceover for your pitch. So no, it's not. They're two completely separate items. So in your video, you can show us your solution, show us your team, you know, have people tell us how great you are, you know, have your friends, your grandma, your aunts, your clients tell us how great you are and how great your solution is. Show us who your team is, show us your solution, take us into your plant, into your greenhouse, show us your products, show us how great you are as a team. You know, it's the time to kind of take us from our boring London place to you in your country and get us really excited about what you do. So use the video for that. And then the pitch deck is the kind of more general thing that is just, yeah, kind of like a standard pitch deck that where you tell us all about your solution in a little bit more detail. So they are completely separate materials. Great. Is there anything else from anyone? Otherwise, I think we're going to say a huge thank you to our expert Ayna and to the Fly Colony team for joining us today. And as usual, if you have any questions, you know, get in touch with me. I'm on Slack, I'm on email, any which way you're going to reach me. And I will answer any questions you have, although hang on, there are things that are happening in the chat now. About the submission of the final pitch, I'd like to ensure that judges will explore all pitches. Yeah, of course. All pitches are going to be looked at. Oh, for sure. That's why you're doing it. Every single one of the pitches is going to be looked at. Don't you worry. And Anne-Marie, you're worried about not having a prototype and whether it will affect your selection. No, will not affect your selection. So we're very happy with solutions that are still very early stage. and as well as startups that are already more experienced. So you've got two different tracks for the ones that are kind of early stage and the ones that are at the end. However, even if you don't have a prototype, we do need to be able to see and believe that you will implement your solution. So you don't have to have it there already, but we do need to believe in you and that it's something that you will take forward and that it's a fully thought through solution, that you have a business plan in place, that you are ready to take this and make it awesome. But more on that in yesterday's call with Christine on how to win, which will be uploaded real soon. Perfect. You're very welcome, Anne-Marie.
Oh, there's a couple of more questions in Q&A.
Yes.
So there is a question that says, there's some where you mentioned that we need to show ourselves as a team. How can we show ourselves as a team if we're not together? Just to clarify, you can still have your individual headshots. You don't need to physically show yourself together. But I was just referring to, adding some more points about your individual backgrounds and just kind of readjusting the size of your images.
Yeah, and if it was more about the video, then it's perfectly fine for each. So first of all, there's no requirement for every single teammate to be in the video. And again, it doesn't have to be one shot either. You can each do a little section. You can, piece your video together. There are great video making softwares out there that are free. So, you can be in different countries working on your solution and just put it all together in one video. So don't worry about that. Great. I think if there are any last questions, do send them in. Otherwise, I think we have answered everything, which is brilliant. Cool. So thank you, the Fly Colony team, for joining us and for sharing your pitch deck with us. And hopefully the feedback was useful for you. And thank you, Ayna, for giving us beautiful feedback, going through the pitch with great detail, and all the participants for joining us and all your questions.
Yeah. Have a great day.
Beautiful pitches.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.